What if the real fight for Trump's successor isn't between Vance and Rubio? I'm Felix. Welcome to Felix Feel World. Everyone is watching Vance and Rubio, thinking 2028 is a two-way race. No one notices the family that's setting the test. The question was never who becomes president. What the Trump family really cares about is bigger than the presidency. The night the US bombed Iran, inside the temporary war room at Mar-a-Lago in Florida, Trump sat right in the middle. Rubio was next to him. They both stared at the same screen. The airstrike had already started. At the White House Situation Room in Washington, Vance sat in the chair the president usually sits in. A can of Mountain Dew sat in front of him. After it was over, Trump went on and on praising Rubio at a press conference. Said he might be the greatest Secretary of State in American history. A reporter asked if he had any disagreements with Vance. Trump thought for a second and said, "He's slightly different from me philosophically." Then he never mentioned Vance's name again for the whole rest of the event. Vance watched the entire press conference on video. No one knows what his expression was, but from that day on his real opponent was no longer the Democrats. This war between Vance and Rubio to be the successor is more intense than the battlefield in Iran. Vance got the vice president seat because three people placed bets on him, one after another. The first person was Peter Thiel. The way Thiel picks people is completely different from traditional politicians. He came from venture capital. He picks people like picking projects. He gave young people $100,000 to drop out of college and start companies. His screening criteria was just one thing. Does this person have no way back? Someone with no way back won't betray you because they have nowhere else to go except the path you give them. Later, Thiel gave a speech at Yale Law School. In the audience sat a poor student who just came back from serving in Iraq. Grew up in the Ohio Rust Belt. His mother was addicted to drugs. He only earned his tuition by joining the military. That person was Vance. Nobody remembers exactly what Thiel said in that speech, but Vance latched on to Thiel. Right after graduation, he went straight into Thiel's investment fund. From that day on, Vance's entire life trajectory was tied to Thiel. Later, Vance went back to Ohio to start a company. The money came from Thiel's network. The book Times Hillbilly Elegy Times became the go-to read for elite circles trying to understand Trump voters. Overnight, Vance went from a nobody to someone who could talk to both the Rust Belt working class and the East Coast elite. Thiel personally brought Vance to Mar-a-Lago, sat him across from Trump for the first time. Later, when Vance ran for Senate, Thiel dumped $15 million into his super PAC, $15 million to buy an Ohio Senate seat. That math never adds up unless Thiel wasn't buying a senator. He was buying someone who could one day sit in the White House. Thiel isn't playing this chess game alone. There's a saying in Silicon Valley, the PayPal Mafia. Those people who started PayPal with Thiel back then all became power players later. The circle never broke up. As soon as this administration came in, the whole circle entered the game together. Vance is the face they push to the front. His working class story makes the masses accept him. His Yale degree makes the elites not reject him. Most importantly, his entire political life grew out of Thiel's system. The person whose lifeline is held by someone else is the most reassuring. The second person who placed a bet was Donald Trump Jr. In the final round of the 2024 VP selection, Trump himself leaned toward North Dakota Governor Burgum, a quiet billionaire. But Don Jr. jumped in fiercely. He publicly opposed Burgum and pushed hard for Vance. A lot of people at the time read Don Jr.'s move as personal friendship between young guys. But the Trump family wasn't looking at Vance for personal connections. They were looking at the lesson from Pence. Back then, Pence stood at the Capitol and refused to cooperate with Trump in challenging the election results. That day carved a deep scar into the Trump family's mind. Pence was the institutional guy Trump brought in, the respectable face to guarantee the MAGA movement. And at the critical moment, the institutional guy went back to the institutions. The Trump family couldn't forget that lesson. So by the second campaign, the family no longer wanted a respectable guy to help Trump get in the door. They wanted someone who grew up inside MAGA, someone with no independent political power, someone who couldn't flip the table. Vance fit every point. His political life sprouted from inside MAGA. He had no state political base built over years, no old Senate network, no independent donor system. All his resources traced back to Thiel and the Trump family. In other words, he was a carefully chosen, safe successor. But Don Jr. pushing Vance doesn't mean he fully trusts Vance. Someone asked Don Jr. if he'd run for president himself someday. He said, maybe one day. The latest polls show his approval among young Republican voters is getting close to Vance's. Amazon is talking to him about starring in a reality show. Old Trump became a household name from that kind of show. Don Jr. doesn't actually need to run. The Trump family always has a blood card in their hand. That card might never get played, but just its existence is the most effective leash on Vance. I'm the real crown prince. The third force doesn't have a specific face, but it's bigger than the first two. In 2025 at the Las Vegas Bitcoin conference, Vance stood on stage and shouted, "The White House finally has an ally for crypto capital." The people sitting in the audience had spent the last 10 years terrified that Washington would suddenly reach out and regulate them. Now the vice president himself stood up and said, "I'll block them for you." Vance pushed Congress to loosen regulations on stablecoins. Crypto capital pumps money into politics. Politics dismantles barriers for crypto capital. Both sides can do the math on that deal. On the same trip, Vance raised funds for Trump's Political Action Committee. Entry fee, $1 million per person. He got it. With new money in hand, the next step was to take over the pipeline for old money. Around the same time, Vance was appointed finance chair of the Republican National Committee. That title means the list and phone numbers of the top donors in the Republican Party now all go through Vance's hands. The vice president became the accountant. Who gets money and who doesn't? He has a say. Money issue solved. Next came the organization. In 2026, a tech donor group, co-founded by Vance, held a closed-door summit. About 250 people showed up. Entry fee, $100,000. Nobody outside knows what they talked about behind closed doors. But this kind of meeting isn't about listening to speeches. It's about dividing territory. After Trump, who gets to direct this right-wing infrastructure? Which pipe does the money flow through? Which states, which candidates get resources? The $100,000 buys that. At the same time, after Charlie Kirk died, the leadership of Turning Point USA, the largest right-wing youth organization in the country, changed. The new leader's first move was to publicly endorse Vance, announce support for his 2028 presidential run. What makes this organization powerful is that it has ground troops in every early primary state. In Iowa and New Hampshire, people have already started showing up to campaign for Vance. But here's the problem. A politician who grows naturally has roots under his own feet. The wind blows, he can adjust. A politician who's manufactured by three forces, his roots are all held by other people. Every step he takes has to consider the people behind him. Vance has to keep Thiel's trust, so he has to keep being the political agent for tech right-wingers. He has to keep the Trump family's endorsement, so he has to act more MAGA than anyone else. He has to keep Turning Point USA's ground troops and those $100,000 tech donors, so he has to keep dividing up territory and handing out positions. Out in the open, Vance is fighting for legitimacy. In the shadows, Rubio is collecting political capital. But Rubio didn't get this far by luck. He got here with a kind of patient, endure hardship style. Back in the 2016 Republican primary, Trump gave him the nickname Little Marco. He used it over and over at rallies and on Twitter. Turned the Republican Party's most respectable rising star into a punchline, a little guy. Rubio lost to Trump in his own home state of Florida. He dropped out that same day. A politician humiliated like that in public usually has two paths. Either retreat behind the scenes, build up capital, and stage a comeback, or quit the game entirely. Rubio chose a third path. He bowed to the man who defeated him. Rubio publicly endorsed Trump. Then he spent almost 10 years, without a word, burrowing deep into Trump's administration. A guy who got slapped in public used 10 years to turn himself into the most indispensable power player for the guy who slapped him. In the 2024 VP race, Rubio was actually a top contender. The donor circle at Mar-a-Lago was lobbying Trump to pick him. But they got stuck on a technical issue. The 12th Amendment says the president and vice president can't come from the same state. Trump's registered in Florida. So is Rubio. But right after that, Trump nominated Rubio for Secretary of State. The Senate voted 99-0. The Senate can't even pass a bill to rename a post office without a fight. The two parties are so split, they can't get anything through. 99 votes in favor means Democrats voted for him. Republicans, who had beef with Trump, voted for him. Even senior Democratic Senator Shaheen publicly spoke up for him. Vance got the vice presidency through a targeted delivery from the Trump family and the MAGA core circle. Rubio got the Secretary of State job through a vote of confidence from the entire Washington machine. One is an insider endorsement. The other is a whole room endorsement. Those two kinds of endorsements determine two completely different playstyles. Vance has to hold on to the MAGA base because his legitimacy only comes from that circle. Rubio doesn't need to hold on to any circle. His legitimacy comes from both parties thinking he can get the job done. So Vance's strategy is to hold on to the title and not let go. Rubio's strategy is to not care about the title, only about the work. And then, Rubio started taking on work. In 2025, National Security Advisor Waltz got fired. Rubio took that role too, without a fuss. A Secretary of State also serving as National Security Advisor the last time that happened was Kissinger. That was on the eve of Watergate, when Nixon was too busy to take care of himself. Kissinger took the chance to grab both the diplomacy and security lines and hold them in his hands. Rubio isn't Kissinger. But the move is exactly the same. While the boss is busy fighting wars, pick up the pieces of power nobody else is paying attention to, one by one, and stuff them in your own pocket. Trump once said, "When there's a problem, call Marco. He'll fix it." In 2026, White House Press Secretary Leavitt went on maternity leave. Someone needed to stand in for her at the podium. Who showed up? Rubio again. He stood there for almost an hour. Iran, the Middle East, the Vatican, oil prices, America's future. He handled every topic, not a single stumble the whole time. After that, the Hill Times ran a headline, Rubio's presidential audition. Right after the briefing, a clip of Rubio talking about America's hope got cut up, paired with images of Reagan and Trump, and went viral online. Elon Musk shared it too. Same day, Vance is in Iowa, campaigning for a Republican congressman. He's mid-speech, getting ready to attack the Democratic opponent, and then he just freezes. Forgets the opponent's name. looks down at his notes, flips through them for a while, can't find it. Finally, he turns around in front of the whole crowd and asks the candidate standing next to him, "What's his name again?" The room goes quiet for a few seconds. That same night, the opponent runs an ad with that clip, looks right into the camera and says, "My name is Garriott. The vice president wants to attack me but can't even remember my name." One guy spends almost an hour chatting and laughing at the White House briefing room. The other guy is flipping through notes on a local stage, forgetting names. Same day, Rubio never says, "I'm taking over." He just keeps showing up at places where someone more senior should be and keeps getting the job done. You can't say he's pushing for it, because every time somebody called him in. But you also can't say he's not pushing, because every time he ends up right there. Then Iran starts fighting. For the first time, they're both at the same table. One guy is next to the boss, watching the war. The other guy is sitting in the boss's chair, drinking soda. Both images show up in the news at the same time. No narration needed. The audience knows who's in the inner circle and who's on the outside. Later at a cabinet meeting, Rubio is giving a briefing on the Iran situation. Vance is sitting next to him, talking about Easter. A reporter commented afterward that the vice president looked like he was trying hard to talk about anything that had nothing to do with the war. The reporter asked him 3 times if he had any concerns about the war. He got annoyed and said, "You're trying to create a rift between me and the president." That line shows Vance's inner anxiety. A vice president who feels secure wouldn't say that. Only someone who senses a rift widening would deny it before anyone even points it out. In a national poll from May, Rubio got 45.4% in the Republican primary. Vance got 29.6%. Almost a 16-point gap. A Secretary of State who hasn't even announced a run is polling way higher than the vice president. Big donors saw those numbers. Some of them are already privately talking about pushing Rubio to the top. These people backed Trump because Trump can win. But Trump is too hard to control. And Vance is just Trump's younger version. Swap him in, and you're gambling on another 4 years of uncertainty. Rubio is different. He knows whose calls he has to take. He knows how far to take a sentence without crashing the stock market. Big donors want somebody who plays by the rules. But the MAGA base doesn't trust Rubio. Rubio knows that's a hurdle. So he said publicly, if Vance runs in 2028, he'll be one of the first to support him. As soon as he said that, he became a slave to those words. So later he added, who knows? His mouth didn't take it back, but his feet were quietly moving. Rubio acts like he's not fighting for the inheritance. Like that relative at Chinese New Year who says, no, no, no when you hand them a red envelope. His mouth and body both say, don't want it, but his pocket is already open. Trump is not a guy who likes to decide early. In 2026, at a Mar-a-Lago dinner, about 25 top Republican donors are there. A few hours later, the US is about to launch airstrikes on Iran. The war machine is already running. Trump should have been focused on the situation briefing. But he turns around and asks a question that has nothing to do with the war. Who should I support in 2028? Marco or JD? Almost everyone in the room sided with Rubio. A former Trump administration official said later, that result was skewed. The donor crowd at Mar-a-Lago was never Vance's people anyway. Back then, they were the ones lobbying Trump to pick Rubio as VP. But the thing is, Trump knows full well about that bias. Who clapped? Who hesitated? Who looked at the person next to them before reacting? He saw all of it. A guy who already knows who his successor is wouldn't run that kind of poll the night before a war. Only someone who hasn't made up his mind, or someone who deliberately doesn't want to, keeps testing this question in different rooms. 2 months later, at the White House Rose Garden Club dinner, Trump does the same thing again. He asks the guests to show with applause whether they prefer Vance or Rubio. This time, Vance gets louder applause. Rubio isn't there. Trump says on the spot, these two could be a dream team. Then he pauses and adds, but that's not an endorsement. That's Trump's family trade. Always give everyone hope, but never give anyone certainty. He never brings down the gavel, because not bringing it down is the best weapon he has. As long as he doesn't take a stand, everyone has to keep orbiting around him. Vance can't relax, because the Crown Prince title can be taken back any time. Rubio can't stick his neck out, because the vice president was Trump's pick after all. And the donors can't go all in, because if they bet on the wrong side, they lose big. As long as there's suspense, the Trump family can keep raising the price, because the final say is still in the old man's hands. The moment he makes a statement, power starts shifting. If he doesn't, everyone stays in his palm forever. There's also a more practical reason. Vance is keeping the MAGA base in check for Trump. The ground game for the 2026 midterms, organizing early states, managing grassroots anger, Rubio can't do that. The MAGA crowd doesn't trust him. Rubio is running diplomacy for Trump, stabilizing donors, and repairing the international relationships Trump broke. Vance can't do that either. European allies don't like him. Each handles their own pile. Trump sits on the fishing dock, steady as can be. The 2026 midterms are coming up fast. Iran isn't wrapped up yet. If the Republicans lose the Senate, Vance will definitely be the first to take the blame. If Iran turns into a quagmire, Rubio takes the fall. Too many variables. So every time a reporter asks about 2028, Trump's answer always switches between 3 modes. First, praise Vance, he's great, we think alike. Second, praise Rubio, he might be the greatest Secretary of State ever. Third, Tie them together as a dream team, then immediately say that doesn't mean anything. 3 answers, 3 directions. Anyone can pick out the half sentence that works for them. But if you really think about it, he basically said nothing. Vance has to show loyalty. Rubio has to rack up achievements. Donors have to guess the wind. The media has to keep asking. Everybody has to keep circling around this 80-year-old man. That's the state Trump enjoys most, being the center of the universe. Everyone is staring at Vance and Rubio, thinking 2028 is a two-way test. Nobody notices the family that wrote the test. The real question isn't who becomes president. What Trump's family actually cares about is bigger than the presidency. Donald Trump Jr. and Eric started a crypto project called World Liberty Financial. Sounds like a college business plan contest. But the way they split the money is super savvy. 75% of token sales go to the family. That one project alone brought in over $1 billion. The UAE royal family bought 49% of the shares for $500 million. Right after the paperwork went through, the White House signed off on exporting a batch of cutting-edge chips to the UAE. Hard to say those two things are directly connected, but also hard to say they're not. Son-in-law Kushner is even more ruthless. His investment fund ballooned to $6.2 billion by the end of 2025. The biggest chunk came from Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund, $2 billion. Zero returns. Didn't make a single penny for the Saudis, but management fees kept flowing. Around the same time, Kushner was running Middle East diplomacy for the Trump administration, sitting at the negotiation table representing the US. Then he'd step into the hallway and turn into a fund manager, raising money from the people on the other side of that table. So the Trump family's criteria for picking a successor isn't just about loyalty. The crypto project needs to keep earning. Kushner's fund needs management fees. Money from the UAE and Saudi Arabia needs to keep flowing. This pipeline handles more money in a year than most countries' entire diplomatic budgets. Who becomes president is the surface question. The real question is, who, once in office, won't touch this pipeline? Vance won't touch it now, because he hasn't sat in that chair yet. But once he does, the power of the presidency changes a person. Pence was also picked as the safe choice back then. And look what happened, he turned on Trump at the Capitol. Rubio won't touch it now, because he still needs the family's endorsement. But the day he doesn't, a guy who's been in Washington for 20 years has 100 ways to quietly start an investigation. That's the real anxiety for the Trump family. The only thing Trump has truly accomplished in the last 10 years is grabbing both the anger of the people and the machinery of Washington in his hands. The grassroots feel like he's avenging them. The donors believe he'll cut taxes and protect their assets in the end. Allies around the world are sick of him but still have to take his calls. This whole system works because Trump stands in the middle. One hand tossing up the people, the other hand tossing up the machine. Both sides keep spinning, stop, and it all crashes. Vance and Rubio each learned only half. Vance can get a rally crowd screaming their lungs out, but when Washington donors see his number pop up, they hesitate to pick up. Rubio can get 99 votes in the Senate for his nomination. Put him on a stage in Ohio for 10 minutes, and people in the crowd start checking their phones. Trump can handle both sides. Not because his skill is better than the two of them combined, but because on both sides, there are people he personally destroyed. Jeff Flake, senator from Arizona, voted against Trump once. Trump called him out by name at rallies, again and again. Flake's approval rating dropped over 10 points in a month. Didn't even dare run for re-election. Left politics entirely. Liz Cheney, number 3 in House Republican leadership, voted to impeach. Trump labeled her a traitor with one sentence. She got crushed in the primary by an opponent almost nobody had heard of. Neither of those people were small players. One was a senator, the other a party leader. Same result either way. Trump flips on a dime. One sentence can ruin a political career. That kind of fear is very hard to inherit. Trump is almost 80. Every day, he stays standing. This balancing act lasts one more day. If the Republicans do well in the midterms, the table can hold up a little longer. If they do badly, the cracks will start showing from the same old place. Some Republican donors are already cutting checks for both Vance's and Rubio's fundraising events. They no longer believe only one guy will win in the end. When the sharpest people in the casino start betting on both sides, it means the House doesn't have as strong a grip on the game as it looks. But even if they hold it together, so what? Vance takes over Silicon Valley. Right-wingers get more contracts. Crypto capital gets wilder. The rich-poor divide gets deeper. Rubio takes over the anger of the MAGA base, doesn't disappear. It just finds a new outlet. Trump leaves his family a never-ending pipeline for wealth. But what he leaves for America is a car with no brakes. So whether it's Vance or Rubio behind the wheel, the engine's still rigged to drive straight off a cliff. If you like this, hit subscribe for more stories like this.